The horse stumbled into Petaluma just after dawn. Its rider slumped forward in the saddle with frost coating his hat and shoulders like crystalline death. And nobody thought Owen Irwin would survive another hour in the bitter January cold of 1885. Willa Langford was kneading bread dough in her kitchen when she heard the commotion outside her boarding house. She wiped flour from her hands onto her apron and stepped onto the porch, her full figure silhouetted against the morning light. The widow had been running the boarding house alone for 3 years, since her husband Thomas died in a mining accident, and she had seen plenty of trouble roll through this Northern California town. But the sight of the half-frozen cowboy being carried toward her door by 2 ranch hands made her heart clench with an emotion she thought had died with Thomas. "Mrs. Langford, we need help," called out Dutch Henderson, one of the hands from the Weatherby Ranch. "Found him on the North Trail. Been caught in that freak storm that blew through last night. He is barely breathing." Willa did not hesitate. "Bring him inside. 3rd room on the left upstairs. I will get blankets and hot water." They carried Owen Irwin up the narrow staircase, his long legs dangling limply, his face pale as milk beneath the stubble and grime. Willa had already stripped the bed and was layering it with every blanket she owned. The man's clothing was soaked through, and she could see his lips had taken on a dangerous blue tinge. "Get those wet clothes off him," she commanded, her voice steady despite the racing of her pulse. "Dutch, you and Tommy head down to the kitchen and put every pot I have on the stove. I need hot water, but not boiling. Lukewarm at first." The ranch hands exchanged glances. "Mrs. Langford, maybe we should fetch Dr. Preston." "Dr. Preston is 3 hours away tending to the Ferguson family. This man does not have 3 hours." Willa was already pulling extra quilts from the linen closet. "Do as I say, and hurry." Once the men had stripped Owen down to his union suit and left the room, Willa assessed her patient with clinical efficiency. She had nursed Thomas through 2 bouts of pneumonia before the accident took him. She knew hypothermia when she saw it. The cowboy's breathing was shallow, his pulse weak and thready when she pressed her fingers to his wrist. His skin felt like touching marble. She worked quickly, rubbing his arms and legs to encourage circulation, wrapping him in the blankets but leaving his torso exposed so she could monitor his breathing. Dutch and Tommy brought up basins of warm water, and she soaked cloths to lay across his chest and stomach, gradually warming his core temperature. "Who is he?" she asked as she worked. "Owen Irwin," Dutch said. "He is a horsebreaker from up Montana way. Was heading down to work for the Weatherby Ranch. Boss hired him 3 months back, but he got delayed. Guess that storm caught him in the hills. He is lucky you found him. Horse brought him in, really. Smart animal, knew to head for town." After the ranch hands left, Willa continued her vigil. She changed the warm cloths every 10 minutes, monitored his breathing, and gradually added more blankets as his body temperature began to stabilize. But he remained unconscious, and as the hours passed, her concern deepened. She had warmed his body, but he remained trapped somewhere between life and death, unreachable. By evening, Owen's color had improved slightly, but he still had not opened his eyes. Willa sat in the chair beside his bed, exhausted from the constant care. She found herself studying his face in the lamplight. He was handsome in a rough way, probably in his late 20s, with strong features and dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. There was a scar along his jaw, and his hands, though now warming, were calloused from years of hard work. "You have to come back," she whispered, surprising herself with the intensity in her voice. "You did not survive that storm just to slip away now." She thought about Thomas, about how she had held his hand as he died, unable to save him from the internal injuries the cave-in had caused. She thought about the long, lonely years since, running the boarding house, keeping herself busy, never allowing herself to feel too much. And now here was this stranger, and she felt something crack open inside her chest, some desperate need to save him, to prove that death did not always win. 3 days passed. Willa barely left Owen's side except to prepare meals for her other boarders and maintain the house. She spooned broth between his lips when he seemed semi-conscious, changed his bedding, and continued the warming treatments. On the fourth morning, just as dawn light filtered through the curtains, his eyes finally opened. They were gray, she noticed, storm gray like the sky before rain. "Where am I?" His voice was barely a rasp. Willa nearly dropped the basin she was carrying. She set it down quickly and moved to his side. "You are in Petaluma, my boarding house. You were caught in that storm. The ranch hands brought you here 4 days ago." Owen tried to sit up and immediately fell back against the pillows, groaning. 4 days? You were in bad shape. Nearly frozen solid. I have been working to warm you back up. She poured him a glass of water and helped him drink. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a herd of cattle and left for dead." He managed a weak smile. "But I am alive, which I did not expect. You saved me." "I did what anyone would do." "No." His gray eyes held hers. "I heard you when I was under in the dark. I heard your voice telling me to come back. You pulled me out." Willa felt heat rise to her cheeks. "You need to rest. I will bring you some broth." "Wait." His hand caught hers, his grip surprisingly strong for someone so recently near death. "What is your name?" "Willa. Willa Langford." "Thank you, Willa Langford. I owe you my life." She gently extracted her hand, flustered by the warmth that spread through her at his touch. "You do not owe me anything. Just focus on getting better." Over the following week, Owen's recovery progressed steadily. Willa brought him meals and changed his bandages where frostbite had damaged the skin on his fingers and toes. They talked during these visits, at first just pleasantries, but gradually deeper conversations emerged. Owen told her about growing up in Montana, about his parents' ranch, and how he had learned to break horses from his father. He spoke about the freedom of the open range, the satisfaction of earning trust from a wild Mustang. Willa found herself sharing things she had not spoken about in years. She told him about Thomas, about their brief marriage and his sudden death. She talked about the challenges of running the boarding house alone, about the townspeople who looked at her with pity and treated her like she was made of glass. "You are not glass," Owen said one afternoon as she fluffed his pillows. "You are steel wrapped in kindness. Not many people could have done what you did for me." "I am just practical," she deflected, but she felt something warm unfurl in her chest. By the second week, Owen was well enough to move around the room. Willa found him standing by the window one morning, looking out at the street below. He had borrowed some clothes from another boarder, and she was struck by how tall he was, how broad his shoulders were beneath the borrowed shirt. "You should not be up yet," she said, though without much conviction. "I have been lying down for 2 weeks. I am going stir-crazy." He turned to her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "Besides, I wanted to see what my angel looks like in proper light. I am no angel. You are to me." He crossed the room slowly, still moving carefully. "Willa, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest. All right? Why did you work so hard to save me? You did not know me. I was just another drifter passing through, but you barely slept for days. Dutch told me. He said you were like a woman possessed, refusing to give up." Willa clasped her hands together, struggling to articulate something she barely understood herself. "When Thomas died, I could not save him. I tried everything, but his injuries were too severe. I felt so helpless, so useless. When they brought you here, I saw another chance. I could not let death win again. I could not stand by and watch another person slip away when maybe, just maybe, I could do something to help. Owen reached out and gently touched her cheek. So I was a second chance. No, she met his eyes. You were not Thomas. You were you. And somewhere in those first hours, it stopped being about proving I could save someone and started being about needing you specifically to survive. I do not know how to explain it better than that. I think that is the best explanation I have ever heard. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone and she found herself leaning into the touch. I feel it too, this pull between us. I felt it even when I was unconscious, like you were a light guiding me back. Owen, I know it is fast. I know I should not be saying these things when I am still recovering and you are my caretaker. But I have never been good at holding back the truth. You have gotten under my skin, Willa Langford. These past 2 weeks, talking with you, getting to know you, it has meant everything. Willa's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. I am a widow. I am set in my ways. I run a boarding house and I have responsibilities here. You are a drifter, a horse breaker who goes where the work takes him. I have a job waiting at the Weatherby Ranch. That is 6 miles from here. I am not drifting anywhere. He took both her hands in his. And I do not care that you are a widow. I care that you are brave and smart and kind. I care that you have a laugh like music and that you get this little crease between your eyebrows when you are concentrating. I care that you saved my life and in doing so, you gave me something to live for beyond just the next job, the next town. This is madness, she whispered, but she was smiling. Maybe, he smiled back, but it is the best kind of madness. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. She did not. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Willa felt tears prick her eyes because she had forgotten what it was like to be kissed with tenderness, to be held like she was something precious. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his. What are we doing? I think we are starting something, Owen said softly. If you want to, no pressure. I will understand if this is too much, too soon. Willa pulled back to look at him properly. His gray eyes were serious now, vulnerable. She realized he was as scared as she was, as uncertain of this strange, sudden connection. That vulnerability made her brave. I want to, she said. I am terrified, but I want to. Good. He grinned, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, happier. Because I am terrified too, and misery loves company. She laughed and swatted his arm. You should get back into bed. You are still recovering. Only if you promise to have dinner with me, here in my room. Something more than broth and bread. That would not be proper. Willa, you have been in my room alone with me for 2 weeks. I think we have already blown propriety out of the water. She considered this. He was right, of course. The town gossips had probably been having a field day. She had been so focused on keeping him alive that she had not thought about appearances. All right, dinner. But I am bringing my other boarder, Clarence, as a chaperone. Deal. That evening, Willa prepared a proper meal. Roast chicken, potatoes, green beans from her root cellar, and fresh bread. Clarence Morrison, her only other current boarder, joined them. He was an elderly banker who had retired to Petaluma for the quiet life, and he kept up a steady stream of amusing anecdotes that made the dinner feel less like a scandalous private meal and more like a friendly gathering. After Clarence excused himself, pleading exhaustion, Willa and Owen sat together by the window, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. Tell me about your dreams, Owen said. Not the dreams you had when Thomas was alive. Your dreams now. It was a good question, one no one had asked her before. Willa thought about it carefully. I want to expand the boarding house. There is a property next door that might come up for sale. If I could buy it, I could create something bigger, something more than just a place for drifters to sleep. A real home for travelers with good food and comfortable rooms and a feeling of welcome. She paused. That probably sounds silly. It sounds wonderful. You should do it. It takes money, money I do not have yet. Yet, that is the important word. Owen shifted to face her. I have some savings, not much but something, and I will be earning wages at the Weatherby Ranch. If you need help, if you need a partner in this dream, I would be honored. Owen, we have known each other for 2 weeks. You cannot just invest in my business venture. Why not? I believe in you. I believe in what you could build, and selfishly I want a reason to stay close to you. If that means being your business partner, so be it. Willa shook her head, but she was smiling. You are impossible. I prefer determined. He caught her hand and brought it to his lips. Give me a chance, Willa. Let me prove that this is not just gratitude or some temporary madness brought on by nearly dying. Let me show you that what I feel is real. She studied him in the lamplight, this man who had stumbled into her life frozen and dying and somehow thawed something in her she thought was permanently cold. It was too fast, too reckless, too everything she had never allowed herself to be. But maybe that was the point. Maybe life was too short for careful, measured steps. All right, she said. You have your chance. The next morning, Dr. Preston finally arrived to check on Owen. He examined him thoroughly, asking questions about the warming treatments Willa had used. When he was finished, he turned to Willa with approval in his eyes. You did excellent work, Mrs. Langford. Most people would have made mistakes, warmed him too quickly, or not kept the circulation going properly. You saved this man's life, no question about it. Will he be all right? Willa asked. He needs another week or 2 of rest before he attempts any hard labor, but yes, he should make a full recovery. Some minor scarring from the frostbite on his extremities, but nothing that will impair function. Dr. Preston packed his bag. Mr. Irwin, you are a lucky man. I know, Owen said, his eyes on Willa. After the doctor left, Owen insisted on coming downstairs. Willa helped him navigate the steps slowly, and they settled in the parlor where he could sit comfortably on the sofa. It felt significant somehow, having him in the main part of the house, integrating him into her daily life rather than keeping him sequestered in the sick room. Clarence came in from his morning walk and joined them, pleased to see Owen up and about. They talked about the town, about the changes Petaluma had seen over the years. Clarence mentioned that the property next to the boarding house was indeed about to go up for sale. Old Mr. Hendricks passed last month, Clarence said. His daughter in Sacramento is selling. She wants $1,500 for it. Willa felt her heart sink. She had maybe $300 saved. $1,500 might as well be $15,000. Owen squeezed her hand. We will figure it out. Over the following days, Owen continued to regain his strength. He started taking short walks around the property, then ventured into town with Willa when she did her shopping. Petaluma was a small town, and people noticed. They noticed the tall cowboy walking beside the widow Langford. They noticed the way he carried her shopping basket and opened doors for her. They noticed the smiles between them. Some of the townspeople were kind. Widow Anderson, who ran the general store, winked at Willa and told her it was good to see her looking happy again. Others were less charitable. Mrs. Pemberton, the banker's wife and the town's most notorious gossip, made pointed comments about propriety and appropriate mourning periods. It has been 3 years, Willa said one evening, venting her frustration to Owen as they sat on the porch swing. How long am I supposed to wear black and look sad? Thomas would not have wanted me to spend my whole life grieving. People fear change, Owen said. You getting on with your life forces them to confront their own stuck places. Ignore them. Easy for you to say. You are not the one they are calling a shameless widow. Owen's jaw tightened. Anyone calls you shameless in my hearing will regret it. Do not fight my battles for me. Then let me fight them with you. There is a difference." He turned to her, serious. "Willa, I know we have been dancing around this, taking things slow because we are both scared. But I do not want to waste time. Life is too uncertain. I nearly died in that storm. Thomas died without warning. We do not know how many days we get, so I want to spend mine honestly." "What are you saying?" "I am saying I love you. I know it is fast. I know it is probably crazy. But somewhere between you pulling me back from the edge of death and every conversation we have had since, I fell completely in love with you. Your strength, your kindness, your laugh, your dreams, all of it. I love you, and I want to build a life with you." Willa's breath caught. She had not expected this declaration, not so soon, not so completely. But as she looked at Owen, at the sincerity in his gray eyes, she realized she felt it too. It was not like her love for Thomas, which had grown gradually from friendship. This was something different, a lightning strike, sudden and transformative. "I love you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me how much." Owen cupped her face in his hands. "Then let us be terrified together." He kissed her, and Willa felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was real. This was right. Whatever the townspeople thought, whatever fear she carried about loss and heartbreak, this was worth the risk. When they finally pulled apart, Owen reached into his pocket. "I have something for you. It is not much, but I want you to have it." He pulled out a small silver ring, simple but beautiful, with a delicate engraving of vines around the band. "It was my grandmother's. My mother gave it to me before I left Montana, said I should give it to someone special when the time came. I think the time has come." Willa felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Owen, marry me, Willa. I know I do not have much to offer yet. I am just a horse breaker with some savings and a job at a ranch, but I will work hard. I will help you build your dream boarding house. I will stand by your side through whatever comes. Just say yes." She looked at the ring, then at his face, and she thought about how he had stumbled into town more dead than alive, about how she had fought to save him, about how they had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances. She thought about Thomas and the life they had planned that never came to be. She thought about fear and caution and all the reasons she should say it was too soon. Then she thought about lightning strikes and second chances and the way Owen's smile made her feel alive again. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Owen's whoop of joy startled a flock of birds from the nearby oak tree. He slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. Then he was kissing her again, and Willa was laughing and crying at the same time, overwhelmed by happiness she had thought was lost to her forever. They decided to wait a month before the wedding to give Owen time to fully recover and to allow them to make proper arrangements. In the meantime, Owen moved into the smallest room at the boarding house as an official boarder, paying rent like Clarence, keeping everything proper despite their engagement. He started working at the Weatherby Ranch, breaking horses and earning his wages. It was hard work, but Owen thrived on it. He would come home each evening dusty and tired, and Willa would have dinner ready. They would sit together on the porch afterward, making plans and talking about their future. The property next door still weighed on Willa's mind. She went to the bank to inquire about a loan, but the banker, Mr. Pemberton, was less than encouraging. "A loan of that size to a woman alone is risky," he said, stroking his mustache pompously. "Even with your business experience, I cannot approve it. I will not be alone. I am getting married. To a drifter who has been in town less than 2 months. That does not exactly inspire confidence in your judgment, Mrs. Langford." Willa left the bank furious. Owen found her that evening sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the figures she had calculated over and over, trying to make them work. "He said no," she said flatly. Owen pulled up a chair beside her. "Then we find another way. What other way? We have about $800 between us. We are still 700 short. What if we do not buy it outright? What if we make Mrs. Hendricks an offer? Pay what we can up front and the rest in installments with interest. She might agree if the terms are good. Willa looked up. You think that could work? Only one way to find out. Write her a letter, lay out our offer. The worst she can say is no. They spent the evening drafting the letter. Willa explained their vision for the expanded boarding house, their financial situation, and their proposed payment plan. Owen suggested offering slightly above the asking price to compensate for the installment arrangement, bringing the total to $1,600. It would be tight, but they could manage it if they were careful. They mailed the letter the next morning and then tried not to obsess over it while they waited for a response. The wedding plans provided a welcome distraction. Willa was making her own dress, a simple but elegant affair in cream-colored silk. Owen was getting his suit tailored by the local seamstress. They had decided on a small ceremony at the church with just a few friends in attendance. Widow Anderson and her husband had become allies, supporting Willa and Owen against the gossip. They agreed to stand as witnesses at the wedding. Clarence, of course, would be there, and several of Owen's co-workers from the ranch had asked to attend as well. 2 weeks before the wedding, a letter arrived from Sacramento. Willa's hands shook as she opened it. Owen stood beside her, his hand on her shoulder. "Dear Mrs. Langford," she read aloud. "Your letter intrigued me. I appreciate your candor about your financial situation and your vision for the property. My father loved his home and would want it to go to someone who would care for it and put it to good use. I accept your offer with the following terms." Willa looked up at Owen, her eyes shining. She said yes. She wants $800 upfront and the remaining $800 plus interest over 4 years. Owen, she said yes. He picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her soundly. "I told you we would figure it out. We need to go to Sacramento to sign the papers. She wants to meet us. Then we will go. We will take the train, sign the papers, and come back in time for the wedding." They made the journey 3 days later. Sacramento was a bustling city compared to quiet Petaluma, and Willa felt overwhelmed by the noise and crowds. Owen stayed close, his steadying presence keeping her grounded. Mrs. Hendricks turned out to be a pleasant woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She met them at a lawyer's office where the papers were drawn up. "I like you too," she said as they reviewed the contract. "My father would have liked you too. He always said a home should be filled with life and laughter. I think you will do that." They signed the papers, and just like that, they owned the property. Walking out of the lawyer's office, Willa felt lighter than she had in years. The dream was becoming real. Everything was becoming real. The train ride back to Petaluma was peaceful. Willa sat beside Owen, her head resting on his shoulder, watching the landscape roll past. She thought about how much had changed in just 2 months. How a frozen cowboy had stumbled into her life and melted the ice around her heart. How she had gone from lonely widow to engaged woman with a business expansion in the works. It was almost too much to believe. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his voice rumbling in his chest. "That I am happy. Genuinely, completely happy. I had forgotten what that felt like." He kissed the top of her head. "Good. You deserve happiness, Willa, all of it." The wedding took place on a bright Saturday morning in March. Spring was just beginning to touch Petaluma, with wildflowers blooming on the hillsides and a warmth in the air that promised longer, better days ahead. Willa wore her cream silk dress with a crown of flowers that Widow Anderson had helped her weave. Owen wore his new suit, and Willa thought he looked impossibly handsome, his dark hair combed back, his gray eyes bright with emotion. The ceremony itself was simple but moving. They stood before the minister and spoke their vows, promising to love and honor each other through whatever life brought. When Owen slipped the gold band he had bought onto Willa's finger beside his grandmother's ring, his hands trembled slightly. When Willa placed a matching band on his finger, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister said. "You may kiss your bride." Owen cupped Willa's face tenderly and kissed her, and the small gathering of friends erupted in applause. Willa felt joy burst through her like sunlight, brilliant and warm and all-encompassing. They held a small reception at the boarding house. Widow Anderson had helped Willa prepare food, and there was cake and music and laughter. Owen danced with Willa in the parlor, moving slowly to the music from Clarence's fiddle, holding her close. "Hello, Mrs. Irwin," he murmured against her ear. "Hello, Mr. Irwin," she replied, smiling. "How does it feel?" "Perfect. Absolutely perfect." That night, after the guests had left and the house was quiet, Owen carried Willa up the stairs to the main bedroom, the one she had not shared with anyone since Thomas died. She had prepared it carefully, changing everything, making it a new space for a new beginning. Owen set her down gently and they stood facing each other, suddenly shy despite everything. "I love you," Willa said softly. "I know I have said it before, but I want you to know. This is not just gratitude or loneliness. I love you, Owen Irwin, with everything I am." "I love you too, Willa. From the moment I heard your voice calling me back from the dark, I have been yours. I will always be yours." They came together slowly, learning each other, taking their time. Willa had thought she knew what love was, but this was different, deeper, more consuming. Owen was gentle and passionate, patient and intense, and by the time the moonlight had shifted across the floor, Willa felt reborn, remade by love and touch and connection. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Owen's hand tracing lazy patterns on her back. "I could stay here forever," he said. "We have responsibilities tomorrow. The boarding house does not run itself and you have horses to break." Practical as always. But he was smiling. "All right, we will face reality tomorrow, but tonight we just get to be us." "I like that plan." They fell asleep wrapped around each other, safe and warm and home. The months that followed were busy but happy. Owen continued working at the Weatherby Ranch while Willa ran the boarding house. In their spare time, they worked on the new property, cleaning it out and making plans for renovations. It needed work, but the bones were good, and Willa could see the potential. They decided to knock through the connecting wall between the properties, creating a larger common area and adding 6 new guest rooms. Owen proved surprisingly handy with carpentry, and he worked alongside hired laborers to make the renovations. Willa oversaw everything, her vision for the expanded boarding house becoming clearer with each passing day. By summer, they were ready to reopen with the new spaces. Willa had sewn curtains and quilts for every room. She had furnished each space with care, creating comfortable havens for travelers. The expanded dining room could now seat 20, and she had plans for a garden that would provide fresh vegetables for meals. The grand reopening was a success. Word spread about the quality of Willa's boarding house, and soon they had a steady stream of guests. Traveling salesmen, families passing through, even a few tourists drawn by the growing reputation of the establishment. Willa hired a local girl, Molly, to help with cleaning and cooking, and the business thrived. Owen came home one evening in August with news. "Weatherby wants to sell me some land, 20 acres on the edge of his property. Says I have proven myself, and he wants to give me the opportunity to start my own horse ranch." Willa looked up from the ledger she was reviewing. "That is wonderful. Is it affordable?" "He is offering it cheap because it needs work. The land is good, but there is no house, no barn, nothing built." "But Willa, It is a chance to build something of our own. Not just the boarding house, but a ranch. I could breed and train horses, build a real business. How much? $500. Willa did the mental calculations. They had been making their payments on the property loan faithfully, and the boarding house was profitable. They had some savings again. We could do it. It would be tight, but we could manage. You are sure? It is a big investment. She stood and crossed to him, taking his hands. I am sure. This is your dream, Owen. You have supported mine. Now it is my turn to support yours. We will build it together. He pulled her into his arms. Have I told you lately that you are amazing? Not in the last hour at least. He laughed and kissed her. You are amazing, Mrs. Irwin. Absolutely amazing. They bought the land in September. On Sundays, their one day off, they would ride out to the property and make plans. Owen sketched designs for a barn and a house. Willa suggested locations for corrals and a training pen. They talked about what breeds of horses Owen wanted to focus on, about the potential market in the area. By the time autumn arrived, they had saved enough to begin construction on the barn. Owen did much of the work himself with help from some of the ranch hands who had become friends. The structure rose slowly but steadily, and Willa loved watching Owen work, seeing the satisfaction on his face as his dream took shape. One October evening, Willa realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week, not wanting to hope too much, but when the signs continued, she could not deny the possibility. She was pregnant. She debated how to tell Owen. They had talked about children, of course, about wanting a family eventually. But they had been married only 7 months, and she had thought it would take longer. She was 30 years old. It had taken her and Thomas years to conceive, and that pregnancy had ended in a miscarriage, one of the great sorrows of their marriage. She decided to wait until she was certain. She visited Dr. Preston, who confirmed her suspicions. She was indeed pregnant, likely about 2 months along. The baby would come in late April or early May. That night after dinner, Willa asked Owen to sit with her on the porch swing. The evening was cool, and he wrapped a blanket around them both. I have something to tell you, she said, her heart pounding. Owen looked concerned. Is something wrong? No, nothing is wrong. Something is very right, actually. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. I am pregnant, Owen. We are going to have a baby. The expression that crossed his face was pure wonder. A baby, truly, truly. Dr. Preston confirmed it today. The baby should come in late spring. Owen let out a whoop and pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully but tightly. A baby. We are having a baby. Willa, this is incredible. I am going to be a father. She laughed, relieved by his joy. You are happy. Happy. I am beyond happy. I am everything good wrapped into one feeling. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. You are going to be an amazing mother. I hope so. I am terrified. We will be terrified together. That seems to be our specialty. He kissed her gently. Thank you. Thank you for this gift. They told Clarence and their close friends, swearing them to secrecy until Willa was further along. But word got out, as it always did in a small town. The response was mixed. Some were delighted for them. Others, particularly those who had disapproved of the quick courtship, had uncharitable things to say about the timing. Let them talk, Owen said when Willa expressed frustration. We know the truth. We know our love is real and our child is wanted. That is all that matters. As winter approached, Owen worked harder than ever to finish the barn before the heavy weather set in. Willa tried to help but found herself tiring more easily as the pregnancy progressed. She focused her energy on the boarding house, on maintaining the quality and welcome that had made it successful. Christmas came, and they celebrated quietly with Clarence and a few other friends. Willa had knitted a tiny blanket for the baby, and Owen had carved a wooden rattle. They exchanged these gifts with each other, acknowledging the new life they were preparing for. On Christmas night, lying in bed with Owen's hand resting on her growing belly, Willa reflected on the year. 12 months ago, she had been alone, resigned to her widowhood, content but not truly happy. Now she had a husband she loved, a thriving business and a child on the way. It was almost too much good fortune. "Do you ever worry it will not last?" she asked Owen quietly. "That something will go wrong. Every day," he admitted. "But I do not let that fear stop me from enjoying what we have." Life is uncertain, Willa. We both know that better than most. But that is why we have to hold tight to the good moments, to each other, to this family we are building. When did you become so wise? I almost froze to death and got rescued by an angel. It changes a person's perspective. She elbowed him gently. "I am not an angel, you keep saying that. I keep disagreeing." Winter passed slowly. Willa's belly grew round and full. She felt the baby move for the first time in February, a fluttering sensation that made her gasp with wonder. She grabbed Owen's hand and pressed it to her stomach, and they waited together until he felt it too, that tiny life making itself known. "Hello in there," Owen whispered to her belly. "This is your father. I cannot wait to meet you." Willa felt tears prick her eyes. This moment, this perfect moment, was worth every hardship, every fear, every lonely year before Owen had stumbled into her life. March brought warmer weather and the completion of the barn on their property. Owen also started work on a small house, just a few rooms for now, with plans to expand as needed. He wanted it finished before the baby came, a place for their family to grow. Willa's pregnancy progressed normally, much to her relief after the miscarriage years before. Dr. Preston said she was healthy and the baby was strong. She prepared the nursery in their bedroom at the boarding house, sewing tiny gowns and blankets, washing and folding everything with care. In early April, Owen came home with news. "Weatherby offered me a partnership. He is getting older, wants to start stepping back. He said if I invest in the ranch, I can have a percentage of ownership. Eventually, I could buy him out completely." Willa set down the baby gown she was hemming. "That is a huge opportunity." "It is, but it would mean significant investment. More than we have liquid right now." "How much?" $2,000 for a 20% share, with an option to buy another 30% in 5 years. Willa did the mental calculations. They had been doing well, but 2,000 was substantial. "We could take a loan against the boarding house, use it as collateral." "I do not want to risk your business for my dream. It is our dream now. We are a family, Owen. What benefits you benefits all of us." She stood and crossed to him, taking his hands. "If you think this is the right move, then we do it, together." He searched her face. "You are certain, I am certain I married a man with vision and integrity and talent. I am certain that whatever we build, we will build it together. I am certain of us." Owen pulled her close, mindful of her belly between them. "I do not deserve you. Good thing you do not have a choice. You are stuck with me." They went to the bank the next week. Mr. Pemberton was reluctant, but the numbers spoke for themselves. The boarding house was profitable, the loan would be secured, and Owen's opportunity at the Weatherby Ranch was solid. Eventually, Pemberton agreed, and they walked out with the funds they needed. Owen invested in the ranch and became a partner. It changed their financial situation immediately. He began earning more, and his stake in the ranch meant they were building equity, not just earning wages. The future looked brighter than ever. On April 28, 1886, Willa went into labor. It was early morning and Owen had just left for the ranch. Clarence heard her cry out and immediately ran to fetch Dr. Preston while Molly stayed with Willa. Owen rode back at a gallop when word reached him. He burst into the bedroom to find Willa in the midst of a contraction, her face pale and strained. "I am here," he said, taking her hand. "I am right here." The labor was long and difficult. Willa had never felt such pain, such intensity. But every time she thought she could not continue, Owen was there, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement. "You can do this," he said over and over. "You are the strongest person I know. You saved my life. You can do this." Finally, as the sun began to set, their baby was born. Dr. Preston held up a squalling, red-faced infant and announced, "It is a boy." Willa fell back against the pillows, exhausted but elated. Owen was crying openly as Dr. Preston cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a blanket. Then he placed their son in Willa's arms. The baby was perfect. Tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect. He had dark hair like Owen and was already showing his lungs were strong. Willa touched his tiny face with wonder. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." Owen sat beside them on the bed, his arm around Willa, both of them staring at their son in awe. "He is beautiful," Owen said. "Absolutely beautiful." "What should we name him?" Willa asked. They had discussed names but had not decided. Now, looking at their son, Owen said, "What about Thomas Owen? Thomas after your first husband because he was part of your journey to me, and Owen so he carries a piece of both of us." Willa looked up at her husband, tears streaming down her face. "That is perfect. Thomas Owen Irwin." They spent the evening as a new family, learning their son, marveling at his tiny fingers and toes, counting his blessings. Clarence popped in to congratulate them, as did several neighbors who had heard the news. But mostly it was just the three of them, cocooned in their room, discovering parenthood. "I never imagined this," Willa said later that night as she nursed Thomas for the first time. "I never imagined feeling this complete." Owen kissed her temple. "Neither did I. But I am so grateful we found each other, that you saved me that morning and gave me this life." "We saved each other," Willa corrected. "You pulled me back to life as much as I pulled you." The weeks that followed were exhausting but joyful. Thomas was a good baby, sleeping reasonably well and eating enthusiastically. Willa recovered from the birth with Owen's careful attention. He took on more responsibilities around the boarding house in those early weeks, making sure Willa could rest and focus on healing and caring for their son. As summer arrived, they settled into a rhythm. Willa managed the boarding house with Molly's help, and Owen worked at the ranch, now as a partner with real say in decisions. On Sundays, they would take Thomas out to their property, showing him the house that was slowly taking shape, telling him about the ranch they were building for his future. Life was not without challenges. Money was sometimes tight, especially with loan payments and the costs of raising a child. There were disagreements and stresses, moments when exhaustion made them snap at each other. But they always came back together, always remembered what they had built and why it mattered. On their first wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Willa with a finished room in the new house. He had worked on it in secret, creating a beautiful bedroom with windows looking out over the rolling hills. "Our home," he said, showing it to her. "Not finished yet, but getting there. By next year I want us moved in." Willa walked through the space, holding Thomas on her hip. She could see it, their life here, more children playing in the yard, horses in the corrals, the boarding house continuing to thrive in town while they built this ranch into something lasting. "It is perfect," she said. "You are building us a legacy. We are building it together." By Thomas's first birthday, the house was complete enough to move into. It was a bittersweet moment, leaving the boarding house that had been Willa's home for so many years. But Molly was ready to take over as manager, and Willa would still oversee the business, just from a bit more distance. It was time for this next chapter. They held a party to celebrate both the move and Thomas's birthday. Friends from town and the ranch gathered. There was food and music and laughter. Willa watched Owen toss Thomas in the air, listening to their son's delighted giggles, and felt her heart swell with gratitude. Widow Anderson pulled her aside at one point. "You look happy, dear." "I am. Genuinely, completely happy. I am glad." "You deserve it after everything you have been through." Widow Anderson patted her hand. "That cowboy of yours is a good man. The best man," Willa agreed. That night, after all the guests had left and Thomas was asleep in his new nursery, Willa and Owen stood on the porch of their house, looking out at the land they owned, the life they had built. "You remember that first morning?" Owen asked. "When I rode in half frozen? I remember thinking you were going to die. I remember being determined not to let that happen. Best decision you ever made. Best decision we both made. You chose to fight to survive. I chose to fight to save you, and then we chose each other over and over again." Owen pulled her close. "I would choose you in every lifetime, Willa Irwin, in every possible world. I would choose you too. Always." They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. Their son slept peacefully inside. Their ranch stretched out before them, full of potential. The boarding house in town continued to thrive under Molly's management, providing them with steady income. They had debts still to pay, dreams still to chase, but they had each other, and they had this life they had built from nothing but determination and love. As the stars began to appear, Owen turned to Willa. "What do you think? Should we give Thomas a sibling?" Willa laughed. "He has only just turned 1. I know. But I like the idea of a big family. Lots of children running around, filling this house with noise and love." "Let me recover from the first one before we discuss more," she said, but she was smiling. The truth was, she could see it too. More children, more love, more life filling these rooms and this land. "Fair enough, I can be patient." "Since when?" he grinned. "Since never, but for you I will try." The following years brought the growth they had hoped for. The ranch prospered under Owen's partnership with Weatherby. They acquired more horses, built a reputation for quality training, and began breeding their own stock. Owen's expertise became known throughout the region, and buyers came from as far as Sacramento to purchase his horses. The boarding house continued to thrive as well. Willa promoted Molly to full manager and took a step back, visiting weekly to review the books and ensure everything ran smoothly. The business provided steady income that supplemented the ranch earnings and allowed them to continue improving their property. In the spring of 1888, Willa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, she was less surprised and more prepared. Thomas was nearly 2, energetic and curious, and she wondered how he would adjust to a sibling. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Owen was attentive but less panicked than the first time, and Willa felt more confident in her body's ability to bring a child into the world. They prepared Thomas as best they could, talking about the baby, letting him feel Willa's growing belly. In December of 1888, their second son was born. They named him James William Irwin, and he was the opposite of Thomas in temperament. Where Thomas had been calm and easy, James was fussy and demanding. But he was healthy and strong, and they loved him fiercely. Thomas adjusted to his baby brother with the adaptability of youth. He liked to bring James toys and pat his head gently, mimicking how Owen and Willa handled the baby. It was endlessly endearing, and Willa found herself falling in love with motherhood all over again. Life settled into a busy but satisfying pattern. Owen worked the ranch while Willa managed the household and children. They hired help as they could afford it. A young man named Peter to assist Owen with the horses, and a woman from town, Mrs. Chen, who came twice a week to help with laundry and heavy cleaning. By 1890, Owen had saved enough to buy another 30% of the Weatherby ranch as they had planned. Weatherby was ready to step back entirely, and Owen became the majority owner. They renamed it the Irwin Ranch, a moment of pride for both Owen and Willa. Their family continued to grow. In 1891, Willa gave birth to their first daughter, Grace Elizabeth. She was a beautiful baby with Owen's gray eyes and Willa's curly hair. The boys adored her, and Owen walked around in a daze for weeks, stunned by the perfection of his daughter. 2 years later, another daughter arrived, Louise Margaret. By then, the house had been expanded to accommodate their growing family, and the ranch had become one of the most successful in the region. Willa sometimes paused in her busy days to reflect on how far they had come. That frozen cowboy who had stumbled into town nearly a decade earlier had become her husband, the father of her children, a successful rancher and her partner in every sense of the word. She had gone from lonely widow to the center of a vibrant, loving family. The challenges of those early years, the financial struggles and the doubts, had refined them, made them stronger. They had built something lasting, something that would outlive them and provide for their children and grandchildren. Owen often said that the best day of his life was the day he nearly died, because it brought him to Willa. She would laugh and say the best day of her life was the day she decided to save him, but they both knew the truth. The best day was every day they woke up together, every day they chose each other, every day they built this life side by side. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1896, Owen took Willa back to Petaluma, to the boarding house where they had met. Molly had long since moved on, and a new manager ran the place, but Willa still owned it, and it still bore her mark in every carefully chosen detail. They stood in the room where Owen had recovered, where Willa had fought to save his life, and where they had first confessed their love. "This is where it all began," Owen said softly. "No," Willa corrected. "This is where we found each other, but it began when you chose to keep fighting in that storm, to let your horse bring you to safety. It began when I chose to not give up on you. Then it began when we both chose life over death, hope over despair." Exactly. They kissed in that room, a kiss that held a decade of love, of partnership, of building and dreaming and fighting for what mattered. Then they went home to their children, to their ranch, to the life they had created together. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also constant love. Their children grew. Thomas became a skilled horseman like his father. James developed a head for business and eventually took over managing the financial side of the ranch. Grace married a neighboring rancher and started her own family. Louise became a teacher in Petaluma, educating the next generation. Owen and Willa grew older together, gray threading through their hair, lines appearing on their faces. But the love between them never diminished. If anything, it deepened, becoming richer and more complex with each passing year. They would sit on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset, holding hands like they had when they first fell in love. Sometimes they talked about the early days, about how improbable their story was. A frozen cowboy and a determined widow, finding each other against all odds. "Do you ever regret it?" Owen asked one evening when they were in their 50s, the ranch thriving, their children grown and successful. "Do you ever wish you had stayed safe in your widowhood rather than taking a chance on a half-dead drifter?" Willa looked at him, at the man who had been her partner for more than 2 decades, who had given her children and love and a life beyond her wildest dreams. "Not for a single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Owen Irwin. That morning you rode into town dying was the morning my life truly began. I feel the same way. You saved me in every possible way a person can be saved. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars appeared, one by one, in the darkening sky. Their grandchildren were asleep inside, visiting for the weekend. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and enduring. The boarding house in town continued to operate successfully, now managed by their son James as an investment property. Everything they had dreamed of and worked for had come to pass. But more than the material success, more than the property and business, what mattered was the love they had built, the family they had created, the life they had chosen together. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a grand celebration. Friends and family came from miles around. There was food and dancing and speeches. Thomas stood up and toasted his parents, talking about their love story, about how his father had almost died, but was saved by his mother's determination and skill. "They taught us what love looks like," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not the easy kind that happens when everything is perfect, but the kind that fights, that perseveres, that chooses to show up every day no matter what. That is the legacy they have given us." Willa cried, and Owen held her hand, his own eyes damp. They had not set out to be examples or to create a legacy. They had simply loved each other and built a life. But looking around at their children and grandchildren, at the community they had become part of, they realized that love had rippled outward, touching more lives than they had ever imagined. As they danced together that night, Owen whispered in Willa's ear, "I would do it all again. Every hardship, every challenge, every moment of doubt, just to end up here with you." "Me too," Willa whispered back. "I would choose you again and again and again." The years continued their steady march. Owen and Willa celebrated 40 years of marriage, then 45. They became great-grandparents, a development that filled them with wonder and joy. They slowed down physically, no longer able to work as hard as they once had, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained strong. The ranch was now run primarily by their sons and sons-in-law, though Owen still consulted on training techniques and bloodlines. Willa had long since sold the boarding house to James, who had turned it into a profitable hotel. They lived comfortably in the house Owen had built, surrounded by family, supported by the business they had created. In the spring of 1926, on their 40th anniversary, the whole family gathered again. Owen was 71 now, Willa 65. They were older, grayer, slower, but still deeply in love. They sat in places of honor at the head of the table, surrounded by 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 3 great-grandchildren, with another on the way. Grace stood to speak, her voice carrying across the room. 40 years ago, my parents chose each other against all odds. My mother was a widow who had closed her heart to love. My father was a dying cowboy who had no right to survive that storm. But they found each other, and they fought for each other, and they built all of this." She gestured around the room at the family, at the ranch visible through the windows. "They showed us that love is not just a feeling. It is a choice you make every day. It is work and commitment and showing up even when it is hard. Thank you, Mother and Father, for showing us how it is done." The room erupted in applause and cheers. Owen stood slowly, helping Willa to her feet beside him. He looked around at all these faces, these people who existed because he and Willa had found each other, had chosen love, had built a life together. "I was supposed to die in that storm," he said, his voice still strong despite his age. "I was frozen, barely breathing, with no reason to believe I would see another sunrise. But your mother refused to let me go. She fought for me when I could not fight for myself. She pulled me back from death, and in doing so, she gave me the most incredible life I could have imagined. Everything good in my life, everything that matters, started the day I met Willa Langford. So thank you, my love, for saving me. Thank you for 40 years of love and partnership. Thank you for this family, this legacy, this beautiful life." Willa was crying openly now. She stood on her toes to kiss him, and the room erupted in applause again. As they sat back down, surrounded by the noise and love of their family, Willa squeezed Owen's hand. "We did good," she whispered. "We did better than good," he whispered back. "We did everything right." They lived several more years together, growing older but never apart. Owen passed first, in his sleep on a quiet autumn night in 1929. He was 74. Willa held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she also felt gratitude for all the years they had shared. She lived another 3 years, surrounded by family, still sharp and engaged with the world. She told stories about Owen, about their early days, about the morning he rode in half frozen, and how she had refused to let him die. She made sure her grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew the story, understood that love was worth fighting for, that second chances were real, that life could surprise you with joy even in the darkest moments. When Willa passed in 1932 at the age of 71, the entire town of Petaluma mourned. She was buried beside Owen on a hill overlooking their ranch, under an oak tree they had planted together in their early years. The headstone reads simple words: Owen and Willa Irwin, they chose love. Their children ensured the ranch continued to thrive, passing it down through generations. The story of Owen and Willa became family legend, told and retold, a reminder of what was possible when two people found each other and refused to let go. The boarding house that had brought them together eventually became a historical landmark, a testament to the woman who had run it and the love story that had begun within its walls. Visitors could still see the room where Owen had recovered, where Willa had saved his life and, in doing so, had saved her own, because that was the truth at the heart of their story. Owen had been dying when he rode into Petaluma, but so in a way had Willa, frozen in her grief, unable to move forward. They had saved each other, warmed each other back to life, and built something that lasted far beyond their years. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the ranch, still tell the story of the frozen cowboy and the curvy widow who did what no one else could, who brought warmth back into a dying man and found her own heart thawed in the process. It was a love story for the ages, born in the harsh winter of 1885 in a small California town, nurtured through hardship and triumph, and enduring long after both Owen and Willa had left this world. It was proof that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, that second chances were real, and that sometimes the person who saves you is the one you were meant to spend your life saving in return. On the ranch, under that oak tree, the wind still whispers through the branches, carrying with it the echo of a promise made long ago. To love, to honor, to choose each other, every day, no matter what. And somewhere in that whisper is the sound of laughter, of joy, of two souls who found each other against impossible odds and built a legacy that would never fade. The end of their mortal story, but the beginning of their eternal one, together always, just as they had promised that March morning when they stood before God and family and vowed to be one. Owen and Willa Irwin, the cowboy and the widow, who proved that love could conquer even death's cold embrace, who showed that warmth could return to the frozen heart, who built an empire of love that stretched across generations. Their story was complete, every thread resolved, every promise kept, every dream fulfilled. From that frozen morning to their final days, they had lived fully, loved deeply, and left behind a legacy that would inspire their descendants for generations to come. The ranch thrived, the family grew, and the memory of their love remained a guiding light. showing that true love, the kind worth fighting for, could weather any storm and warm even the coldest heart.